let's talk about Orb on the Movements of the Earth. This is such an amazing anime. It was just released late 2024, I believe October, and it's still ongoing. I have one episode left to watch from what is currently being released, and I must say that I want to tell everyone how amazing it is, which is why I'm making this video. I will try my best to separate this video into 2 parts and allow for anyone that has not watched it and does not want any spoilers to skip certain parts, which is why I'm gonna leave anything relating to characters or going a bit more into the actual story for the last half. Let's go through why it's such an excellent show. Initially, I actually did not want to watch it. I heard the opening theme and it was starting to be kind of everywhere for some reason, and I was like, it's gonna be another one of them shows that have no substance. I started giving it a go and I fell in love. Give it at least 3 episodes, that's when it goes crazy. It's so unique. It presents the story in such a way that I have not seen before in any anime, and I do watch quite a fair bit. One of the first things that made it interesting was the plot twists and the fact that we do not follow a character but an idea or a concept, in this case a theory. It's such a visceral style of storytelling. The developments are so unhinged. It's just unexpected and beautiful. It's very contrasting because there's parts of the story that are just absolutely beautiful and others that are just cruel and horrible. This story is set in a kingdom that is inspired into the 15th century Poland, and we follow a set of characters that are interested in astrology, astronomy, and science. I think this show is for people that want to draw their own conclusions, get into something a little bit deeper and more meaningful. If you are not into any of those things, really not into intelligent conversations or history or philosophy or science, then it's not going to be for you. I mean, you could still appreciate it, but I don't think you would appreciate it the same way. One of my top things that I liked about it is it's so full of emotions. The characters, you realize they're just playing their part as residents of the 15th century. No one is actually escaping their fate, which is insanely cruel but also just realistic. There's loads of introspective scenes where people question their own belief system and values. There's a very interesting development of characters. Everyone is quite complex, well written. Madhouse did a great job at animating the actual story. The contrast between beauty and horrible themes is so present that it just makes it such a masterpiece. They set the characters apart by presenting their individual beliefs and motives. Someone that is seeing everything from an outside perspective, you get to connect with each individual in a certain way and they all think they're doing something right. One of the most important things is the power of the church at the time, the Catholic Church, that was the most prevalent and influential power in the country, and they were basically just dictating what is okay and what is not. Let me tell you, if the church didn't like you, well, you were burnt on a stake. Maybe you were just tortured. You get to see how even if the story of an individual ends, it still impacts the future of the history. You're no longer part of the story as per se, but you influence that story with every little single action. The idea of continuity and casualty is presented beautifully. It's just like handing down a baton that is just passed on to the next person without even them knowing or acknowledging this. But somehow it's all interconnected into a very realistic and cruel way. The show itself requires you to put in the extra work to make all these connections and understand the story. Like, everything helps the story continue, but in such a mysterious yet hilarious way. Some scenes that are just absolutely terrible, casualties, are so unexpected yet uncontrollable when a second sets apart someone from discovering the truth about something, yet because they did not make it in time, they don't get to actually reach that truth. Everyone is just fighting for what they believe in. The church is just trying their best to stop these heretics from gaining any power and creating issues for them. The whole belief of systems that this society is based on, everyone was accepting that Earth stands still and everything else revolves around us, which now we know that it's bullshit. But at the time, lots of people had to face a cruel fate just for others to continue researching this. The fact that the sun is at the center of the solar system and that our Earth actually moves. All the characters are very influential, even if they play a very, very small part. Not all of them are scientists. Some of them are just very simple characters. But even so, they're still important. And each individual is vastly different from one another. You can see the power the church holds and the fact that they will go to such lengths to silence these people, torturing them, burning them on a stake, and executing them. You get to see that the people that actually truly believe in this, they don't care about putting their life at risk because the truth is much more important. Copernicus was the first person to actually write detailed theories about the heliocentric model, and Galileo followed to prove these theories. Now I'm gonna go a little bit more into the actual characters. They also present a lot of insight into the gender disparities. We get to see a woman that's a smart scientist and she's putting her life at risk to join these meetings that she cannot attend because she's a woman. Her superior gets her thesis and publicizes them in his name. Just get to see the harsh reality if you were a woman of science or knowledge at the time. You would probably get thrown into a prison or tortured until you confess that you were a witch. And we get to actually understand that loads of these people were confessing just so that they could escape the torture of the Inquisition. Most of the time, this escape was just death. The first character we follow is one of the most innocent characters, but also he has one of the strongest convictions. We get to follow him into discovering and further developing this theory, endangering his life for it, is ready to give it up for the sake of answering the greater questions in life. He's such a brave and amazing character, honestly, and when you realize his age, it just makes everything a lot more unexpected. Even if he's not present anymore later in the story, you do get to see that the continuity I was talking about initially is there, and that he will still be part of this baggage that is getting passed on to the next person that's continuing this history and research. Even if his name is forgotten, he's still playing such a big role in it. Hubert was the first contact that Raphael had with this theory, was actually studying heliocentrism as a heretic. He ends up being burnt on a stake by the Inquisition, which is obviously part of the church. In part 2, we get to see two very interesting characters. On one side, we've got Oxy, which is a very simple character. He somehow manages to get past this fear he has or trauma from religious indoctrination and develops a very brilliant conviction. He's very kind-hearted and he plays a very important role in transmitting this story further. He's by no means a scientist whatsoever, but basically he helps to continue this research in a way that is going to make it understandable to the main public or to the everyday people. But Danny, I'm not gonna lie, he's one of my favorite characters. So he's a monk that's basically working with Oxy to further develop this theory. In the part 2 of the series, we get to actually see him initially self-absorbed, knowledge-seeking, knowledge-driven person, but he's also quite antisocial and he can come across like a bit narcissistic, I guess. But later on in the story, we get to understand that he was actually a very kind man too. He was just more of an introvert, I guess. He puts together this masterful plan to make sure that this book they are writing the information in is not gonna be destroyed, and that's just so ingenious and amazing. Even if he's a monk, he goes against the church for the sake of research and truth. Even after losing one of his eyes, he's punished by the church and they burn one of his eyes. And even after that, he still does not want to give up the pursuit of knowledge, showing the capabilities and the lengths that humans are willing to go to just for the sake of discovery and curiosity and satisfying our thirst for knowledge and truth. We get to see Jolenta, that is playing such an important part in the series. She basically gets to help Oxy and Bethany in their research. Some stuff happens. She's accused of being a heretic, of course. We get to see her development when she gets a full dose of reality by finding out her father's true job, I guess. She was completely oblivious to this. Even so, she grows from a child, basically, because she was just a very young girl, into a woman full of conviction and strength. Her character gets very complex, and she's another one of the people that risk their lives for their convictions and fight with all they've got to keep this story going, to keep this theory going further. We also get to see later that loads of people get blamed to be heretics or witches just for doing things that the church dislikes. I left Nowak for the last kind of ish. Nowak is a very interesting character. We get to see his full development. At the beginning, I feel like no one really likes him because he's playing the villain, but we see a human side of him. We see that he was just another victim of his convictions. He was just believing that the church was doing what was the will of God, capturing these heretics and helping society to punish this evil people. He was just a pawn in the end that was just controlled by the church. We get to see his human side when at the end, on his dying moments, he sees Raphael in this vision and he has a very insightful and deep conversation with him. Obviously, this is just him having a conversation with himself. He realizes that he's actually done a lot of bad things and that none of those killings and punishments and tortures he was doing in the name of God were actually serving God. And we get to see that a lot, that there's this contrast between what the church is doing and when people that work for the church have a change of heart and they question if what they are doing is actually truthful or not. We get to see that everyone has this questioning of morals and values. They just keep doing it because they want to believe that they're not doing something evil, but they are. It's very cruel and funny how Noah doesn't get to fully see his daughter and he's lied to. He's basically just removed because he was seen as a threat by other clergy member. I get to see there's a lot of corruption and just plays of power. People are just doing things not because they serve God, but because they want to serve their own purposes. Wavering conviction between right and wrong, and the self-discovery, the journey to realize that maybe what you've done so far was actually not truthful to your beliefs, that maybe you were the bad guy. But in the end, we just get to see that everyone is a victim again of history and society. Draka is another character we see later on, one of the first characters that's actually not a believer. She has quite a big trauma from childhood and all she wants in life is money. She does not put value into other things. She's very distrustful, but she's very intelligent until her final moments. she does not actually understand the value of life, but in the end she realizes that what she was trying to achieve was not important, and it's just a roller coaster of emotions. So deep and meaningful to see all these characters going through this evolution and realizing what was actually important in their lives. It's obviously kind of late because they do not get this moment of truth until they are about to die. Smith is another interesting character. He's basically the first one to present a more separated view on God that differs from the church. His beliefs are more based on druid or pagan style values. He basically calls himself a naturalist. He does not align with the church and with what they're doing, so he ends up getting really involved into the heliocentrism theory and helping Jolenta out and actually helping Drac out. It's just such an interesting story. I haven't seen the next episode yet, so I might do a little short or something to follow up on the story, but honestly, just watch it. Is a beautiful piece of art.